Today, we encounter another story of the Apostle Peter as we continue our series, Unexpected, the unlikely, ironic, and surprising stories of the book of Acts. Peter is in Lydda as he went here and there among all the believers, where he found Aeneas, who had been bedridden for 8 years, for he was paralyzed. The storyteller says Peter told him to get up and make his bed. And immediately he did just that. I wonder how many of you moms out there have said to one of your children, get up and make your bed, and they immediately got up and did that. All the residents of Lydda saw the miracle, and they reportedly turned to the Lord. So it was a mass conversion experience. It's no surprise then that word would reach neighboring Joppa, where our story picks up this morning. In Joppa, we heard that Peter raised Tabitha, a female disciple of Jesus, who had become ill and died suddenly. She had been prepared for burial and laid in an upper room. Now, Tabitha was no ordinary disciple or woman of her time. Scholars note that in the first century, the majority of the poor and starving were women. And that's still true today. Especially those who had no male agencies that might have helped them benefit from the male-dominated systems of the ancient world. And many would argue, yet today. Tabitha was a non-conformist. She was widely known, and especially for her acts of charity, especially making and giving coats and other clothing for the widows of her community. She was a disciple of Jesus, an activist for the poorest of the poor. She may have had some wealth, which afforded her the privilege of sharing with others. The fact in the story that the storyteller says she was laid in an upper room may tell us that she had a large home, and that large home would have been afforded only by some wealth. Even so, as one commentator said, Tabitha used her privilege, her wealth, just acts, and gifts, and prophetic speech for the benefit of the less privileged, the widows, the indigent, the hungry, the depressed, the oppressed, and marginalized in her community. Her loss was huge for the entire community. And so her raising was more than a miracle. It was a restoration of hope and life for all who were served by her generosity, her charity-driven love for her sisters. When Peter called her by name and commanded her to get up, just like Jesus when he raised the centurion's daughter, Easter took place all over again in Joppa. Not because a body was resuscitated, but because a fragmented community breathed in wholeness and life once more. Scholar Will Willimon, who wrote a commentary on the book of Acts, said, "This new community is one where widows once left to fend for themselves in often unbearable circumstances will not be left to perish." That was the divine order or chain of beings. Widows were last and left out. Widows were supposed to stay at home and let the men devise an affordable welfare system for them. Aeneas was supposed to obey doctors' orders and stay in bed. Peter was supposed to stay with his fishing nets. Everyone had a fixed place, a divinely fixed place. And all were supposed to stay right there. And then along came Jesus. And Jesus shattered all of those old orders and revealed the way of truth and life. A way paved with unexpected compassion. And Tabitha was just another follower of that way. Well, I've been privileged to meet several Tabithas in my life and ministry. Women disciples of Jesus who were activists of compassion in their communities, putting their faith into action. The first woman who came to mind as I was thinking about this day and this story this week was a woman who was affectionately known as Mother Dove. Mother Dove. Her name was Marilyn Sue Simcox. She was a member of Central Christian Church in Decatur, Illinois, where I had the privilege of serving as pastor for a little over a dozen years. She helped found the domestic violence program in Decatur known as Dove. She was just under 5 feet tall, and she was a fierce Italian advocate for the poor, the abused, the homeless, those who were treated unjustly in any way. I'll never forget the first time that I met Sue Simcox. It was very, very briefly after I had started my position in Decatur as their pastor for children, youth, and families, one of their associate pastors on staff. And part of my executive portfolio, as it said, was to oversee the CACS department, the Community Action and Community Service Department of Ministry of Central Christian Church there. Well, that was the department that related most closely to Dove and to all of the service-oriented compassion and justice ministries of the church. And here I was, a brand new minister, just in my mid-20s, coming out of seminary, recently ordained right here in this sanctuary, starting out my new ministry, and Sue, as I know her as Susie Simcox, came to my office and sat in the chair in front of me with the goal of setting me straight. I never argued with that, ever in the time that I knew Susie Simcox. What was amazing was that we bonded that day in an amazing way. That we found commonalities in the Lord that we served, in the Jesus who called us to ministries of compassion and service for the least of these. She was very happy that that was kind of the direction of my ministry, that I cared about people who were poor and underserved and underprivileged in our communities. So we bonded and we had a soul connection right there in that office. But even as we agreed on things, she reminded me before she left that if she ever needed to set me straight, she'd be back in those chairs in front of me, ready and willing to do that. Susie Simcox was a force in the ministry of the church, but not only in the church, but in the wider community. And one of the programs that she helped establish through Dove in Decatur was a program called the Mother to Mother program. It's not just a Decatur-specific program, it's kind of a nationwide program. And back in the 60s, when she started that program in Decatur, the idea was that a mother of some privilege, a mother who had housing and food and clothing, and whose family had enough wealth to sustain themselves, and then would partner with a new mother, a young mother who might be struggling to get through financially, a mother who might be receiving WIC benefits and other benefits. And the idea was that that partnership would then grow into a friendship. And mother to mother, they would learn from one another and they would support each other. And Sue Simcox started that ministry in Decatur. It lasted for more than 20-some years. And during that time, she partnered with several different moms, but one mom in particular whom she walked with all the way through to her great-grandchildren. and the amazing differences that we watched happen in the lives of that family, because Susie Simcox took the time to make sure some kids had some shoes, to make sure a mom had somebody to talk to over coffee once a week or once a month, to make sure that grandkids got special gifts from Grandma Sue on Christmas. Susie Simcox took that time. She was a Tabitha. She was a person of great strength and faith in our community. The next person that I remembered was this person, Nancy Rude. Nancy Rude was a younger version of Susie Simcox. Nancy was the director of the Oasis Day Center that I had the privilege of helping establish in Decatur. It was a day center for homelessness in the area, one of the first of its kind in central Illinois. The day center provided a place for people who didn't have a place to go during the day to stay warm, or to stay cool as the summer gets pretty hot there, or to do laundry, to have some triage nursing care. There was a place to get coffee, there was a place to read the newspaper, there was a place to have a mailbox and get your messages if you were job hunting and the sort. It was a great little organization. The building was great. We raised a bunch of money. We got a hold of a building and renovated it, and it was perfect for what we needed, and the building meant almost absolutely nothing because it was Nancy Rude who made it work. It was Nancy Rude who had experienced homelessness herself in her own life and had gone through lots of challenges in her own life, who knew how to relate to all who walked in the door. And I mean everyone. Everyone from every spectrum of life you could imagine. And Nancy knew how to relate to them all. She was another force in all of the work that we were trying to do as a congregation in the Decatur-Macon County area to serve those who were the most underserved and underprivileged in our midst. Nancy took me in as a partner in ministry and crime and all the other things that we did to raise funds for Oasis and keep it running and keep it available for the people of Macon County. And she was the mother of a wonderful daughter who went on to be, more than one daughter, but a wonderful daughter that I know, who went on to be an elementary school teacher and is now kind of a force herself for education and other service in the Decatur area. Nancy Rude was a Tabitha of faith. I met Kathleen Taylor the first time I was invited to go to the Good Samaritan Inn soup kitchen to help serve a meal. And I went down, and this was another person who was a little under 5 foot tall and feisty. I don't know if she was Italian, but she certainly had the same kind of zeal that Susie Simcox had, and she had a desire and a passion to serve people and to help people make the steps they needed to lift themselves out of their situations and circumstances. Kathleen never turned away anybody for a meal, and she made sure that the meals were meals that you and I would eat the same for anybody else. One of my favorite memories of Kathleen was the time that through another organization I helped host the Federal Reserve in Decatur. They had come for some meetings and tours and things to see what we were doing and listen to the people there, and we were meeting with them, and they were from the office in D.C., and they came and we took them to lunch at her Good Samaritan Inn. And she treated them just like anybody else, even though they had their nice suits and whatever else on. They got the same meal. It was the same goodness, the same charitable goodness that day. Who do we pay for this meal? This meal doesn't cost anything. This meal is free this day. And I could see in their eyes and maybe within their hearts, something was happening in that moment. And most of that was because of Kathleen Taylor and her work. Another Tabitha of faith in my life. Moving back up here, about 8 years ago, one of the first people that I met was another Tabitha of faith in our community. And that would be Miss Sandra Knight. Sandy as we love to call her, is the executive director of the YWCA of Kankakee County, where she has served for 30 plus years in not just in that role, but other roles, but primarily in that role as executive director of the YWCA. Sandy has reached out to families across our county for years to help them secure early childhood education for their children and daycare for working moms trying to struggle and make ends meet in our community. She's also worked tirelessly to include people in our community. In other words, to work against all barriers that keep people from feeling like they're included and part of our community. She's been tireless in her efforts to eliminate racism as one of the major causes of those barriers in our communities and in our nation, and also one of the two missions, empowering women and eliminating racism, that the YWCA has as a national organization. She spearheaded and led the expansion of the Y in the last 8 years since I've been here. They added on classrooms for more preschool education and early childhood education, because Sandy knows that when children, the second most hungry and left out people in the world, when children have a good early start in life, they have the potential for being successful adults, not only out in the world, but right here in our hometown and our community. So many people's lives have been touched by Sandy Knight, by this Tabitha of faith, right here in our midst. I've met several Tabithas, as I said, and some of those are people who have worked in various different capacities. The first one on the left is Marcia Brown Medina. She works with the Hispanic Partnership in our community and through Catholic Charities. She's done really great work in our community, working to keep families together and to enhance the quality of life for Latino women and children and families all across our community. And she does this nearly thanklessly. It's really hard to find a picture of her on the internet. I had to dig and dig and dig to get this picture. And whenever you have to really dig to get somebody's picture, it can mean one of a couple things, right? One, she'd be mortified to know that her picture's on the screen this morning because she's a private person, and that could be one. But the other thing is that she's humble. That she does this with a certain humility. That her goal in life is not for her picture to be plastered everywhere in front of everyone, but to serve the people. And I've gotten to know Marcia over the years, and she is absolutely a force in our community, a Tabitha of faith in Kankakee County. The middle person there is Donna Sample, and Donna is the director over at Options for Independent Living here in our community. She works tirelessly to help persons with differing abilities gain access to work, to employment, and to living spaces that are set for them with all the differing abilities they may have. Wheelchair access, for instance, or wider doorways, or options for those who have hearing deficiencies and those who can't see well, and all of those kinds of things. Works very hard for this population that often is forgotten and left out. We have laws, of course, about what's supposed to happen for those folks, but that doesn't mean they're enforced on a regular basis. And so Donna is a great advocate in our community for people who are often underserved and often forgotten in our community, all the folks with differing abilities. And Donna is certainly a Tabitha of faith in our community. The woman on the right is Jeanette Tatro. Jeanette is one of the lead persons at Thresholds Incorporated here in the Kankakee County area. That's located, if you don't know, it's in the old Montgomery Ward building across from the Paramount Theater downtown in Kankakee. And Thresholds is a business that specializes in mental health care and mental health services in our community. And I met Jeanette back about seven and a half years ago through the Continuum of Care for Homelessness and Housing in Kankakee County. And I have seen so many great things that not only has she done individually, but the organization continues to do under her leadership. Between then and now, they've established a drop-in center during the week that people with different mental health issues can go in, and there's workshops and things available, activities available for them to do, and also an in-house residence center right there at Thresholds where some folks can live and participate in daily activities and have a good quality of life despite the mental health challenges that they may be facing in their life. And Jeanette was a partner in starting Blessings in a Backpack for the community. She also was instrumental in having folks from Thresholds, the day program, and the Living Center there to participate as volunteers for Blessings in a Backpack. And so every month, at the first of the month when we have our 10 a.m. packing, I have a group that comes from Thresholds, and they come here to pack bags for Blessings in a Backpack. And I may have already shared this with you, and I can't remember if I already did, but this last packing of the first of the month on May 1st, they were here and they were here to pack, and they came to me with an envelope and presented me with a donation for Blessings in a Backpack, something they did a year ago. Their in-residence community saves their aluminum cans all year to turn in on Earth Day to give that donation to Blessings in a Backpack so that they can help feed kids in our community. Many of the folks who are serviced by Thresholds and who come and volunteer, they've seen poverty themselves. They've known what it's like. Some of them, one was telling me that he lived in a box on Lower Wacker Drive in Chicago and on the streets of Chicago for 5 years. And now he's here and he's got good quality of life. He's working under the tutelage of Jeanette Tatro and her entire staff who are doing such great work in our community. And I know Jeanette's faith very well, and she is a Tabitha of faith in our community. You've probably seen this person's picture a few times. Sorry, it's a little dark back in there, but this is Dr. Dawn Brewers, who's made lots of news recently as executive director of Fortitude Community Outreach and all of the wonderful programs that they're running. Their street outreach on Thursday nights. They manage the PADS sheltering program that we took part of from January through May 1st. And we'll kick back off in October again, providing that emergency sheltering possibility for folks that save lives, I have no doubt, during our negative 24-degree temperatures with wind chills of 50 below when folks were right here at Central Christian Church that night. And so they've recently been given bargains and treasures where they're doing some work not only to raise money for Fortitude Community Outreach, but also to offer job opportunities to people so that they can build resumes and soft skills so they can be into the employable in the workforce and move from their circumstances in poverty and perhaps homelessness into housing and employment or other resources so they can be more self-sustaining in their life. This weekend they're having their first gala event as a fundraiser that I'm looking forward to attending at the end of the week. And Dawn, she's a social worker by trade. She did social work and counseling and taught at Olivet Nazarene University for a while, supervising social work students in our area. And it was through all that work that she connected with the problems of homelessness in our community. And we got together. I was able to meet her through the continuum of care as well. And in that space, I found another Tabitha of faith in our community who wanted to reach out and do the most good that she could. There have been many women disciples of Jesus who carried unexpected and who carry unexpected compassion to those whose lives have often felt void of compassion. So I'm wondering this morning, as we reflect on this first named woman disciple in the New Testament, on Tabitha and her work with the widows and providing clothing and providing a safety net and support system for them when there was none. I'm wondering who's been a Tabitha in your life? Who's been a Tabitha of faith in your life? Who is it that you've known who has reached out into her community in amazing ways? I know some of you have names popping right out in your head right now, very quickly. Some of you will think of relatives, even your own mother, doing something for the community. Some of you will think of school teachers and church members and nurses and other folks in the community around you have just done amazing things in your life. Maybe it was a next door neighbor or somebody down the street who was reaching out into her community, a true Tabitha of faith. Or, as it may be, as you're sitting right here, in whose life are you a Tabitha of faith? In whose life are you a Tabitha of faith? In whose life are you a disciple of Jesus Christ, living the way, the truth, and the life? In whose life are you reaching out, bringing compassion that's unexpected? One real quick story to share with you as we close up today, and that is over the 3 months that we offered the sheltering system here in Kankakee County, the PAD system. One of the things that I heard from women and men alike, from guests and volunteers alike, was, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect this. I remember one particular story of a gentleman who is going through a really difficult time. He's battling alcoholism, and he's out of work, and he was homeless, and just everything in his world seemed to be falling apart. Everything in disarray. Nothing good was happening for him. One day, after he had secured a job, and the pressures of that job were around him too much, he had a little too much to drink, and he got himself into a health crisis, and he ended up down at the hospital. It was our shelter night, and I knew he was missing from shelter, and I knew he had a new job, and so I had the freedom to be able to leave the shelter that night. There were other people here to take care of things, and I drove out downtown to search for him. And I looked in all the usual places that I knew. I looked around the bus depot. I looked around the Salvation Army. I looked downtown. I looked at the library. I looked at all the places, the train depot, just trying to find this gentleman. I had just about given up my search. I was driving back to the church, and I came down Court Street. I got to St. Mary's Hospital, and I was getting ready to go to 5th Avenue and run 5th Avenue one more time. It was getting pretty dark, and thought, well, maybe he's walking, trying to get to shelter, because I knew he'd been released from the hospital. Out of the corner of my eye, as I passed the bus shelter there in front of St. Mary's Hospital by Med Center East, I noticed some bumps on the bench. So I turned around the corner, and I came back to the bus shelter, and I approached it very carefully, gave myself some distance, and I yelled out his name a couple times. And he responded, and I said, "Get up. Get up." And he got up. Then we sat down in that shelter, and we had a conversation. All he kept saying to me was, "I can't believe you came to find me. I can't believe you came to rescue me. I can't believe you're out here to find me." Well, the good news ending of that story so far is that that man is housed. He has a job that's full-time, and changes are happening in his life. And we pray that all of those good changes continue to bring out good results in his life. I can't believe you came to find me. I just can't believe you came out. Amen.